The U.S. unemployment rate has risen for 4 consecutive months. Over the last 75 years, every time unemployment rose for 4 consecutive months, the U.S. economy entered a recession.
You can look at whatever your business is and try to figure out what's the recession-proof version of it.
U.S. household debt increased by $109 billion in the second quarter of 2024 to a new record of $17.8 trillion.
What can I actually do about this? And what do I need to be doing on a daily basis? And it's so easy as humans to just get wrapped up in the chaos. If you're going to be in this market, you got to wait it out.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the King's Table. We are short Mr. Sultan of Sofas. He's out taking over the world, doing big deals in China, but don't worry, we got you guys covered. We got a lot to dig in on today's docket. We have a real talk about the state of the world and what do we do about it. We talk about what's going on 88 days out from the presidential election, diving into the polls, who's winning, who's losing, does it really matter? We've got some major updates on the stock market update, and Aaron really digs into some really insightful graphs that I think create some real perspective around the emotions that happen when it comes to investing and how you can avoid those pitfalls and make sure that your portfolio doesn't suffer as a result. We got the fourth turning and Aaron's rosy predictions. Mike, of course, leads us down a path of death and destruction, but Aaron brings us back. But don't worry, we make sure that it's a lot of fun in this discussion today. And most importantly, just how to be a savage to thrive in our scary world that so many people feel is really heavy right now. And just to kind of remove a lot of that pressure and stress that oftentimes we can all get sucked into and really align with the things that are going to serve you going forward. So I think you guys are going to enjoy today's conversation. Let's go ahead and dig right in.
Mikey, what do you think's happening with the world right now? With all the craziness that's going on, is it crazy? Is it a big deal?
I think it is potentially a big deal, but I'm like in the camp of Elon Musk at this point in time. I'm like thinking we live in the Matrix. I don't think a Hollywood producer could write a better story about than what's happening right now. Like, it just doesn't feel real.
Something you mentioned was it's like you're wondering if it's beneficial to watch the news anymore, or beneficial to be a part of it, or beneficial to be caught up on it. Like, there's so many things you can prepare for and so many things you can't. And it kind of reminds me of my take on, hey, the world's ending. Should we be a prepper or not? And then part of my mindset's like, well, it's not good for me to go down that rabbit hole because there's not much I can do. Now, maybe I can, and maybe there will be a day I'll wish I did more. So is that kind of what you mean when it's like, hey, is it beneficial, or are you realizing like it's dragging you down, so it's making you less productive? Because the news is not, we're going to talk about a lot of it, but the news isn't happy-go-lucky fun this week. I mean, I'm sure on Monday and Tuesday, like I had some really weird feelings of going like, all right, what's next? Yeah.
And I don't even know what episode it was. This was probably 8 or might have been a year ago. We were talking about stuff like this. And it's like, when it really comes down to us as individuals on a daily basis, like it's so easy to get wrapped up in the stuff that, there was a period of time where we were joking where like I would always say it doesn't matter. I'm anchoring back to that because while everything matters, and obviously, whether it's interest rates or World War III or whatever it is, it does matter to us. Our next president matters to us. The vice presidents matter. What's going on all over the world matters to us in the big picture. But I think what I'm really saying here is like, I'm just coming back to center in like, what can I actually do about this? And what do I need to be doing on a daily basis? And it's so easy as humans to just get wrapped up in the chaos and then get stuck on things that you literally have no effect over, when in reality, I should just be paying attention about, what can I do in my business, which is the things I should be doing anyway. It's, becoming more efficient, cutting expenses, making sure that our staff is doing what they need to be doing. Or if you're a W-2 employee, like, how do I make myself super valuable? Because yes, unemployment is going up and people are getting laid off. So what can I do on a daily basis to make myself more valuable? And I think that that's what I'm really saying is just like, I can get so wrapped up, even a prep, like I'm a prepper, but honestly, I had everything I needed in 2012. I don't need any more guns. Don't need any more ammunition. I don't need any more gold. Like, I just need to focus on, making myself in a better financial place, and not to get, too far off on this, but even just health. Like, we live in a world, and, you guys have always been health focused, but our cortisol levels, like I would love to have a live reading of our cortisol levels when we're watching the news or YouTube and just see what we have enough stress in our own lives, in our own businesses, in our own W-2 jobs and in our own families and things that are going on personal levels. Like we don't need to be wrapped up in things that, yes, ultimately have an impact on us, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Does ammo go bad?
Not if you keep it properly.
The ammo you bought in 2012, is it worthless or is it still going to help us from the zombie apocalypse?
No, it's going to help us.
Makes me, as you say that, it makes me think I should start tracking my health again with a watch, because when I used to do Ironmans all the time, I always had my watch. And I remember coaching soccer for the kids and seeing my stress level get so high while I was coaching soccer. Like my heart would race like 160 beats a minute while I'm like coaching the kids. But Maddie, what do you think about the news? How's it making you feel? How's it make you feel when Mike's like, maybe it's not healthy to watch it anymore? What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's funny because I'm a pretty even keeled dude. I don't get too high, too low. I don't buy into too much of the clickbait, and, trying to discern as much as I possibly can, do my own research. But I have felt in the last week, to Mike's point, I'll give you an example. I walk in the house yesterday and Marie's like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you all like aggressive right now? Why are you kind of like calm down a little bit? What's going on? What happened at work? I'm like, nothing happened at work. Everything's fine. Like, And then she goes, well, something's different. Like something going on with you. And as I kind of sat with that, I was like, I've been fucking doom scrolling more than I have in the last 6 months and like the last week, with the crash, with all the stuff going on with the politics, with, interest rates, like with everything. I didn't even realize how sucked in I've gotten to a lot of, not just like, I don't watch the news, but it's more so like researching and going down this rabbit hole and looking at this and double checking that. And to Mike's point, none of it was really serving me at all. If anything, it was actually doing a disservice to me and my family, because I'm bringing home an energy, I'm bringing home stress, I'm bringing home, mental baggage and physical, BS that is doing nothing productive for my own health, for my family's health, and, for all the other things that really matter to me. So it was just a good, I think you got to find balance in that, in the sense of, you don't want to just completely put your head in the sand and act like your opinion, your education, your stance, the actions you do or don't take, the things you do or don't support matter, because they do. I mean, a perfect example is, look at Venezuela, right? Venezuela was the third richest country in the hemisphere in 1992. And now we're looking at a complete dictatorship over there. And that happened because of decisions that people made or didn't make, what they voted for, what they did or didn't support, right? So you have to understand that we do hold some power as a collective group. And the more we can, be equipped and armed to make the decisions we think are most aligned with our values and what we believe in from, an overall country perspective and the future generations that are going to come, you got to be somewhat educated and equipped. But at the same time, there's got to be a balance and a line and maybe some boundaries. Or, you guys have heard me talk about, you got to find your metaphorical, bumpers to the bowling lane that you're playing within in that moment. And if I go too far off the deep end in some of these areas that really are just putting me in the gutter, and I'm not hitting down, pins and strikes and spares, then I should probably stop doing those things. So for me, it's been interesting to see what's been going on with, this whole, kind of unfolding on the Democratic side with Kamala Harris getting selected and now her new VP selection, and then what's going on with Trump. And there's so many things that I want to be educated on and that I'm getting pissed off about and this and that. I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm going to vote for. I'm going to continue to speak up on the things that I think are important to maybe bring some common sense to, or maybe some, respectable debate and discussion around. And I need to get back to business and focus on what really matters, which is, keeping the main priorities. I know we, in a group chat, Aaron, there's a mutual friend and a guy that we know and respect and very successful, very well known in our world. And we just got a message yesterday that he passed away, dropped dead on vacation with his family. I mean, that's the shit that makes you stop and reflect and go, whoa, hold on. All of these things that I'm up in arms about, like all of that could be nothing in a heartbeat. And those are the things that, you know, sadly provide and create some context for all of us. Usually it's around, you know, life and death and your health, right? Oftentimes it can be for some people, you know, financial struggles and challenges, maybe marriage, but it's easy to get sucked into things that don't matter. And it's really important to make sure that you keep the priorities and the things that do matter front and center.
Yeah. There's so many things you said there. It just reminds me a little bit of stuff that I remembered hearing after September 11th of the impact of people rewatching the news and rewatching what happened and the fears that were created. And, you know, for anyone out there listening that's like a little confused and a little stressed and a little scared, like, we see you and we hear you, and it's normal. It's not the nice thing about blips like this in the world and in life, they happen, but they don't happen all the time. But when they do happen, it seems like the world can come crashing in on you. And I've been really lucky to have enough really horrible experiences. I'm able to disconnect myself emotionally from most bad news. But yeah, like when we're so in the face of negativity, and that balance of do we live or not? You know, you guys remember, did you ever hear Jeff Hoffman at any of our GoBundance events?
Oh, yeah.
So for listeners, Jeff Hoffman is one of the founders or the founder of Priceline. And he gives this story of, you know, he had formed a couple different companies before. But when he formed that one, he was just always reading the news. And there's a moral to my story on this, but he was always reading the news. And he didn't like essentially about anything. He was reading about like something in an article. It talked about like produce and how restaurants lose all this money every year from produce that goes bad. And there was some special word for, you know, I guess expired produce, right? Like, but there was a better word that could be used in other industries. And he was already familiar with the travel industry and things like that. And then he was trying to think of like, how does that apply to these other businesses? And he was like, wait, there's no bigger expired produce for an airline than an empty seat, you know, the moment the plane closes their doors, right? They've already loaded up with gas. Gas can be the same amount. They've got an empty seat sitting there because somebody missed a flight or something else. Like, instead of making $300 on that seat, they make $0. And he founded Priceline with that concept in place. And I guess the reason I bring that up is like, and I've discovered a lot of different businesses because of news that I read. And I've discovered a lot of ways to bet because of news that I read. And there's some people that are going to be buying stocks at the right time or buying Bitcoin or like doing really, really well because they take what's in the news and they jump on it. So it's important that we inform ourselves, but I think it also is important that we get to a time that we go, you know what? I need to take a break from that for a little bit. Now, mind you, I don't know if all of our podcast listeners are just unsubscribing now for 3 weeks. So don't do that, please. Or if you do, like if you need a break from our craziness, do it. But like, yeah, I think there is a time that I think it's important to consume, actually. I might be the only person that tells people, I think it's really important for you to consume whatever you can news-wise. But yeah, it's a fine line between, am I going to find the new business plan that's going to change the world? Am I going to find the way that I should bet in today's world or not? But I got a politics question. I think we're going to talk some politics today. We're going to talk stocks today. I got to lob to Mike for a politics question that maybe he has something different he wants to talk about over there. But okay, so Kamala. I'm horrible at pronouncing names. I don't even pronounce Matt and Mike's names right all the time. So she becomes the nominee, and we say, yep, exactly what we predicted, exactly what the all-in guys predicted. It was their only option. Now she's it, and now it's over, and Donald Trump's going to win no matter what. That's my memory anyway, or what my mindset was anyway. And then I start seeing polls of this jump and polls of this gal running for president that is now saying that she agrees with something she disagreed with. Like, her policies are changing by the day. And I read a poll that said she's in the lead. So my question for you guys is, and I got to be honest, like, I'm a fan of Trump. You guys know that. Please still listen to everything else. Doesn't mean that everything I say is bullshit, but I am a fan of Trump. So my first reaction was like fear and panic, like, oh my God, could that really happen? So my question is, what was your reaction? Like, have you actually noticed that like there are some polls right now that are saying she's leading? How does that make you feel? And do you think it's just BS, like when they said Hillary was leading Trump by a lot or not? Like, the whole thing, just unpack it all, because 3 weeks ago, Trump was leading Biden by a lot. And it was like, there's nothing the Democrats can do no matter what. And them substituting in her seemed like the weakest of all Hail Marys they could have done. Am I wrong, or is it fake news?
So one of the things, just back to like living in the Matrix, I think we're at a period of time in America where the more I've sat back and looked at this, the more obvious the divisiveness, the spin, the agendas that I think that are going on behind the scenes are becoming more and more clear. And not to like circle back to like conspiracy theory. I don't think it's conspiracy theory. I think we're at a point in the age of our nation where people care more about I'm like at a loss for the word on this, because morals matter, ethics matter, our opinions matter. But I think we've lost the big picture view of like what is really important. And there's bits and pieces of all of this that tie together, economy, becoming a sovereign nation, like the future of the country. I almost said company because it ties into the same thing. It's like what's happening in companies right now with DEI and acceptance and all of this kind of stuff is just the same thing that's happening in our country. And I think if we like zoom out to, 30,000 feet and you look at democracy, you look at, us being the most powerful nation in the world. You look at, industry. The United States of America is literally like the largest economy business that exists. And if we want to keep that, then the simple answer that we constantly kind of come back to, and why I love Trump, I don't love necessarily, Trump's opinions and the way that he does things, but he's a very, very successful business guy. He's got like 25,000 employees or something. I mean, he's owned hundreds and hundreds of businesses. And when you really look at our country as a whole, or any country as a whole, what makes that country successful or not? It's GDP, it's growth, it's, what makes us as individuals successful, the ability to eat and work and provide for our families. And so when you really just come back to it, and maybe this is oversimplifying it, but like I'm a capitalist at my core. And what I care about is a strong country, a strong, balance sheet, a nation where we can be successful. And I think that there's a lot of people that actually don't want that. And whether they believe they don't want that or not, they want socialism, they want communism. And just circling back to your comment on Kamala Harris, like it's just become very clear to me, people would be turning in their graves right now that were my grandparents would be turning in their graves, just like seeing what's happening right now. And we're so divided based on our opinions, when in reality, I think this is just my perspective, because maybe I'm completely blind, and being a strong, healthy financial nation where people can actually, provide and have a good financial future and be safe and feel protected. And I realize that money isn't happiness, but at the end of the day, I think there's so much unhappiness and division that we're focused on the wrong things. And so it just becomes really obvious to me what's happening right now and why we have, these two like options that we have today, and why everybody is so divided, because we're fighting about things that probably don't really actually matter to the health of the nation. And we're just super focused on it. And somebody might argue with me and say, well, being able to be gay or have an abortion or, black, yellow, brown, red. I don't care about any of that stuff. Like when I say I don't care about it, it doesn't mean that I don't think you should have the right to be whoever you want to be. You should have that right, but it doesn't affect me. I'm not going to like fault you because you want to be gay or because you want to have an abortion. I'm not going to have one, but I'm not going to fight you on it either. And we're so divided on all of these, perspectives that I think it's being intentionally caused. And I think that we're kind of at the pinnacle of the last 10, 15, 20 years of division that have just escalated. And none of that actually matters to most Americans. Like even the idea of like, the transgender thing that we were talking about in California a few weeks back, like honestly, and, we were talking to Maddie, you live in California. Are you going to stay there? You're raising kids there. Honestly, if I loved California and I wanted to live in California, I would stay in California, because I'm not one of those people that think that the schools should indoctrinate my kids anyway. And my kids did go to public school, but if it was today, I don't know if they would be going to public school. But I don't really care what California does. It's my job to instill morals in my kids around what I believe and everything else. It's not the politician's job. It's not the school's job, but we're so divided around it that it's like, oh, California is doing X. I'm going to leave California. United States is doing X. I'm going to leave the United States. I just think we're focused on the wrong stuff, and I'm just kind of done with it.
It is interesting from that perspective. I think, to your point, Aaron, earlier on it just shows, and I think it was Joe Rogan did a little bit of a clip. He's like, man, it just shows how easily manipulated the mind can be and how quickly, because to be somebody that got 0 delegates in 2016, 0 delegates in 2020, now 0 delegates in 2024, but she's still the presidential nominee, is wild for the most unpopular VP of all time to now. And they were criticizing her along the way as well. She was catching heat. Almost, if you look at a lot of that stuff, it's been like wiped clean from the internet. And now, she is, being touted as, she's being touted as, this person that is going to take us to the promised land, when I don't understand how people have forgotten what the last 4 years have been like. And she is, the second P of the pod with Joe Biden. So what is interesting from the perspective of, I think the polls aren't always accurate, first and foremost. And I'll ask you this question. Have you been
Thanks
polled?
for answering that. Thanks. Like that, I think that's an important part of this is like, should we believe the polls or not?
Yeah,
because they're scary.
Well, let me just ask you the question though. Have you been polled?
I have not.
Mike?
No.
I haven't. Do you know anybody else that's been polled?
No.
No. So when you think about the polls in 2016, the polls had Hillary running away with the election and Donald Trump squeaked one through. And in 2020, the polls had Biden, trailing Trump relatively heavy, and he squeaked one out. And so when you look at the polls right now, what I'm getting at is I don't trust the polls. The polls are usually 1,000 to 2,000, maybe 5,000 people max. And then it comes down to as well, who is that data set? Because most of the people that I know, I don't know anybody taking polls. I don't know a lot of Republicans that are taking polls. Maybe it's Democrats. I don't know. But that being said, it's really hard to discern who's winning and who's losing. And, it's just hard to get accurate data from that perspective when you're talking about, hundreds of millions of potential voters to, get a poll that you feel is accurate based on a 2, 5, 10, even 50,000 person data set out of that total amount of potential people voting. It's really hard to give too much weight to that. So I try and check my, assumptions around that. But it is very interesting to, think about the two kind of different camps, I would say. It's not even the candidates, I guess. It's more so about the camps. And I wish I could pull this up real fast because Vivek did a really interesting post on this yesterday where he essentially said, we're going about this and looking at this all wrong. This is not about a particular candidate, whether it was Kamala or Joe Biden or Michelle. He goes, that has nothing to do with it. This is about a system. This is about a machine on one side, and this is about a candidate that wants to break that system and be against that system on the other. And so when I kind of think about, who I'm voting for and how I'm making a lot of these decisions, for me personally, this isn't about Donald Trump to me. This is about American virtues and values and denouncing the stuff that I believe is eroding what made America great and special for in the first place. And, I think right now, people are so worried and scared about being in these discussions and hurting other people's feelings and being, labeled this or that. And they're kind of, afraid of this fact that kindness is now somewhat being weaponized, in my opinion. And it's being, at least taken advantage of, where the average person who I sometimes believe just wants to, do well and they mean well and they don't want to be disrespectful of other people. And hey, if you want to do that or you want to live this way or you want to make this decision, like that's fine. But now this kindness has been weaponized in a way that, it gives this permission to progressiveness and real extreme liberalism that is at the expense of so many other people, because people are afraid of getting labeled as unkind or as a bigot or as a whatever. And so it's really interesting how the human psychology and the mind can be warped and is being weaponized against people to kind of make them struggle on figuring out what side do they actually fall on, when I don't think this has to be a choosing sides kind of thing. And I think that's the question and the conversation that we should be talking more about.
Do you think Montel Williams is sad that he's not dating Kamala anymore? That's an unfair thing to say, but I would say
that's a loaded question. I guess it depends on
so much funny come up. So this is what I'm talking about when it says the polls. You just type in presidential polls, and I would say, to answer my own question, half of my reaction was fear, half of it was surprise, and then half of it was just what the heck is really going on. And then it was that reminder of maybe this is the type of news to not read, because it's tough to know what's true or not. And I think there are some topics that, no matter what, just aren't presented in a truth light. Because every one of these says, poll shows Kamala moving ahead of Donald Trump. New poll shows massive shift for independents. Harris jumps to a small national lead over Trump. Harris widens her lead. One of the things that the guys said on the I'm going to jump over to another tab on All In, was they said there's like a few different topics, right? There's a few different categories. There's the people that were Biden no matter what. There's the people that were Trump no matter what. And there was the people that were Trump for sure and Biden for sure. Right? Meaning there are some people that are like, no matter what, I'm not voting for Trump. I'm going to vote for the opposite. And there were so many that said, no matter what, I'm not voting for Biden. I'm voting for the opposite. So the ones that are up for grabs right now is that's the only group. The people that were going to vote for Biden for sure, because they loved him, are going to vote for her. The people that were anti-Trump are going to vote for anyone but Trump. The only people that's up for grabs were the people that were anti-Biden. The anti-Bidens are the ones that may come some to Trump, may come some to her. I just have a hard time thinking that more changed in that. I'm going to jump over and jump to a different topic and let you guys kind of take it away. This is crazy, right? So one day in stocks, last week we talked about the stock market a little bit. I need to go back and listen to what our prediction was, because I think I remember us saying, like, it's kind of a big deal. We brought it up when we recorded, and then it has felt like so much trouble the last couple days. So I'm going to go back to like 5 days ago when kind of all this started. We're looking at our chart if you're on our YouTube page, and it was like we were at, so NASDAQ was at almost 18,000 on Monday, falls off a cliff, right? Like worst day ever. And then like for a couple of days it lasts like that, and we're getting a little more scared, and you see this big old drop on Friday last week. You see so I think the first day is when we recorded was Thursday. So we saw a drop on Thursday. That's when we first talked about it. And then Friday it was a big drop off a cliff. Then Monday it was a big drop off a cliff. And then this morning the news actually looked kind of good. So today is Wednesday, August 7th. The news looked kind of good, and it said we were getting a bounce back. So this morning, if you'd looked at the news at noon, it's like, oh, we got our bounce back. But now we've given up all the bounce of the day. And now stocks are back down to the low. So if you look at the one day, this is what's so interesting. Down, one day we're down. What do you guys think? Maybe you know this, but if we drop back to 30 days from now and 3 months from now, how would you guess we compare to, first I'm going to do 30 days. How would you each guess we are we down from 30 days ago, or are we even or up from 30 days ago?
We're up.
I like your guess. We're down from 30 days ago. I was surprised by this because I figured we were still up from 30 days ago. So my first reaction was the same. Mikey, when I change this thing to 90 days ago, where do you think our stocks are compared to 90 days ago?
Now, where they're at now compared to 90 days ago?
Yeah.
Definitely up.
I would still say up, yeah. 90 days ago.
This is freaking crazy.
Yeah.
We're down from 90 days ago.
Really?
But we're just barely, right? I guess we're like I would say we're equal. 90 days ago it was 16,300.
And what are we at for the year? I know we're definitely like we're
so
way
yes,
up
you're
for
right.
the year.
So as we stretch further, we're definitely up. So up for the year. So in February we were at 15,800 for NASDAQ, and we're at 16,200 today. So, and then if we do year to date, which is probably what we're saying most importantly, we were at 14.5. So we're definitely up for the year. And so when you look at that chart, you're like, okay, no big news. But also, I was shocked at the size of this, because in general, when I think of stock corrections, and we have that thing going around our chat too, like stock corrections happen. They happen every once in a while. It's like the stock market comes down. But in general, we usually say, but over 5 years, 10 years time, it's always a good bet, a lot like housing. But when I put it on this 6 month year to date type thing, I was actually like, oh, that's pretty substantial. Because that means today's stocks are what they were in March, and it's August. So 5 months ago, we're right where we were 5 months ago, or negligible. That's a bigger, significant change over the last few days than I thought.
Well, this is another, and I want to hear Maddie's more technical approach to this, but this is another example of not paying attention in the short term. Because right now, if you listen, like the sky is falling, we're all going to die. I've said this multiple times on this podcast, and this has always kind of been my thing, whether it's real estate, the stock market, whatever it is. It's like, I mean, even right now, Austin is one of the worst real estate markets in the nation. You know, we're down. Aaron, you would know better than me. I stopped paying attention, but even if we're down 8%, that's after a few years of being up 25, 30%. So are we really down? No, it's just like people that are I think it's because we smoke so much weed now that we have short-term memory loss. And like, we can't remember that, you know, just 3 months ago, everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, you know, we fall off a cliff like happened this week, and we think it's the end of the world. And so just again, from a macro perspective, I think this is just another thing of what we were talking about at the beginning. We just have to be careful of how much stock we put into it. And I was listening to an old video actually this morning. I was just trying to find it a few minutes ago, but it was from a guy, his last name was Lynch. But he was from Charles Schwab, and he was talking about, and this was like 1997, and he was talking about the stock market, and the stock market is actually super simple. Like, the stock market's going to go up. It's going to have a correction every 2 years. And you just need to pay attention to that. And when the correction happens, you need to buy, because we're going to go back up. And then he was saying, you know, every 5 years, we're going to have a bigger, he gave these little milestones, and he's like, you can pretty much count on this. But the one thing that we don't want to do is, we're like, when it crashes, everybody sells at the bottom because we're all freaking out. And that's when everybody else is buying. Like, literally, you know, how many people, and Maddie, on this thread too, maybe, I don't know how much you know about like the Japanese currency trades and all that stuff that's going on right now. Have you guys been following that?
Yeah, it's pretty complex. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but my financial buddy, he explained a lot about it, and it's essentially arbitrage on currency. And with everything that's going on in the Japanese yen right now and their volatility, there's a lot of rotation in and out of currencies right now that is creating a lot of this volatility from a global and a macro perspective. But I wouldn't be able to speak to it in a way that would help educate anybody, but it is very interesting to your point.
Well, I have a video, and Aaron, this goes back to what you were saying earlier about being a consumer. I agree with you 100%. We should be consumers, but we should also dial in who we're going to consume from. Mm-hmm. So there's a guy named Mark Moss. I don't know if you guys follow Mark Moss, but I really like Mark Moss. And he did a 15-minute video. I think it just came out yesterday, and I was watching this last night, and he just does such a great job of, like, you know, bringing it back to understanding. But the name of Mark's video is How Japan Just Destroyed the US Economy, something like that. And he literally brings it back to the fact that Japan did something that nobody expected with their interest rates. They actually raised their interest rates, and it caused a 0.25% spread, which actually caused all of these short sellers against the yuan that were using arbitrage. They're shorting over here, and they're buying on spread, and then they're investing it on our side. And that's actually what he says caused all of this. And again, I don't want to get into the fundamentals of it, but whether that's true or not true, like us freaking out about what happened this week in the stock market. And then Aaron, you bring up such a good, if you just go backwards 4 or 6 months ago, we're basically where we were. We just went on this super freaking skyrocket for 4 or 5 months, and everybody thinks it's just never going to end. It's always going to end. But then it's just going to go right back up. And when you first asked that question, I thought you were saying, where are we going to be in 30 days? And where are we going to be in 90 days? That's why I was a little confused. We're going to be up.
That's a better question, actually. Here's I'm going to pull up one.
You should play that clip too, that Mikey you sent over, because that guy's looking kind of in the rear view mirror, but he's explaining kind of that I thought that was I didn't look at it from that perspective before, but I think it's an important thing to go back and look at all the corrections of the stock market in history, and then what happens after that. To your point, Aaron, of where are we going, we can look backwards to also help, educate us on where we're going forward. While you're maybe trying to find that clip, or after you make your point on this slide, I always thought it was cool too. Brandon Turner did a post the other day, and I think this is important to think about, right? He just said, when in doubt, zoom out, right? Because it's always easy to get like stuck in tunnel vision in a small window of time. And whether that's how you're analyzing, a deal on real estate in the short term, or you're analyzing, a data set on the stock market in the short term, like if we really zoom out the timeline and make it a much longer timeline, then that is something that if you buy good assets and you stay in those long term, from where you started to where you end up, if time is on your side and you're in it for the long haul, you're going to win. It's going to be up. And I will pull up that clip, Aaron, to your point.
Yeah. So the crazier part too, of I guess, does it matter or not? You can take that same chart and go back 3 years. 3 years ago, November 7th, 2021, 16,051. Today we're at 16,300. Over 3 years. So which is just crazy. That's just so strange to me to see such big drops that we had. So I guess what I would say, if you were going to say, where are we going to be, where stock's going to be in 60 days, I have a tough time thinking they're going to be higher. I think there's some bad stuff going on. I think the economy's hurting. I think the sell-off is going to continue, and there wouldn't be a reason that it couldn't hit, I don't know, get half to the trough that it got to, because this other trough that it got to during 2022, the world didn't feel that bad. Like this was just like, it just wasn't that bad at the time. Like November 2022, I remember business feeling so different for stocks to have been like a low over the past 5 years.
You should study history, and history is the important thing you learn from. What you learn from history is the market goes down. It goes down a lot. The math is simple. There's been 93 years a century. This is easy to do. The market's had 50 declines of 10% or more. So 50 declines in 93 years. About once every 2 years, the market falls 10%. We call that a correction. That means that's a euphemism for losing a lot of money rapidly. But we call it a correction. And so 50 declines in 93 years, about once every 2 years, the market falls 10%. Of those 50 declines, 15 have been 25% or more. That's known as a bear market. We've had 15 declines in 93 years. So every 6 years, the market's going to have a 25% decline. That's all you need to know. You need to know the market's going to go down sometime. If you're not ready for that, you shouldn't own stocks. And it's good when it happens. If you like a stock at 14, it goes to 6, that's great. You understand the company, you look at the balance sheet, and they're doing fine. You're hoping to get to 22 with it. 14 to 22 is terrific. 6 to 22 is exceptional. So you take advantage of these declines. They're going to happen. No one knows when they're going to happen. It would be people tell you about it after the fact that they predicted it, but they predicted it 53 times. And so you can take advantage of the volatility in the market if you understand what you own. So I think that's the key to element. Another key element is that you have plenty of time. But you should study history.
All right. I just did a quick calculation. So that chart that I just pulled up, so from November 2021 to what was maybe the trough, like October 2022, was a 38.6% decline, which does mean the one that we've had in the last 5 years was bigger than average, right? He gave 50 times it's gone to 10% and 10 times it's gone 25%. So it was significant, but so far the little sell-off that we've seen that started last week, we're down from 18,000 to 16,300. So what's 2,000 divided by 18,000? We're into the double digits, right? 2,000 divided by 18,000. All right, we're 11% decline so far. So will it keep going, or not based on that. Really good clip. I think it was great that we put that on there. We're not here to predict stocks. We're here to just do our reactions to it. You guys, any more thoughts on stocks before we jump to another topic?
Well, I have a thought not on stocks specifically, but just look at what has happened with like Warren Buffett selling.
Mm-hmm.
Look at who's the guy that owns the tech darling company right now?
NVIDIA?
Yeah. He sold 250 million of his shares. Like, this is the thing that this guy, the Lynch guy, was just saying in this video. It's like the experts that are running these markets, they spend billions of dollars like tracking, analyzing, trading. And for everyday Americans that we're all freaking out right now because the market falls 11%. But the guys that are wealthy, they probably saw this coming and offloaded a whole bunch of stuff, and they're sitting on a bunch of cash. And then when the market falls 11% or 15%, or to Aaron's point, if it keeps going down for the next 2 or 3 months, you figure out where the bottom is or close to the bottom. And then they, you know, Buffett's sitting on, I can't even remember the amount of capital that he's sitting on right now.
It's the most cash Berkshire Hathaway's ever had.
Yeah. And it's like, we're all shocked and surprised by it and freaking out. And this goes back to what we were saying, like, just be careful, you know, what we're consuming. It does hurt for the American that just, you know, had $500,000 in their 401k or whatever that just dropped. Like, that hurts. But that's also, you know, I mean, that's the risk that we have in being in this. And I think we just have to understand as everyday humans that we have no control over this. And Peter Lynch said it in that video. You just have to wait it out. If you're going to be in this market, you got to wait it out. But what happens, everybody starts freaking out and they're like, oh my God, I got to sell now before it plummets another 11% or 20%. And it just like creates this sell off. What, $3 trillion or something was erased in the last few days?
Yeah, 2.9, but then 1.8 was infused back into the market as of yesterday. I'm not sure what the most up-to-date number is.
It dropped back down though.
Today, like but then it dropped back down today. The market's red today. So it'll be interesting to see. Crazy, just wild kind of statement that on the topic of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett now owns more T-bills, more treasury bills than the Federal Reserve does. That's crazy. But that being said, I love Lynch's last comment there, and they kind of cut it off on that soundbite. But he said the most important thing, which is time. Like, if you're in this for the long run and you dollar cost average your way through the down cycles, right? You can really, as long as you're playing the long game, benefit from the down markets more so than you will on the up markets. And I think that's something that's really important. I mean, most of the smart guys that I know that, you know, are not really big real estate guys and they're all about the markets, they were dumping shitloads of money into the market over the last week. They love these kind of buying cycles. I mean, this market right now is a day trader's dream. And so if you can really, you know, say, hey, I'm not a, you know, professional day trader, and I'm not going to ride these highs and lows. I'm just going to look at the fundamentals of how good investors operate, which is when the market goes down, I dollar cost average my position to be a little bit more insulated. And I'm in it for the long haul. So I'm investing in good growth-based companies for the long term. I'm just going to trust in the fact that the market's going to do what it does. I'm not going to get too high. I'm not going to get too low. I'm just going to invest on fundamentals. I'm going to check my emotions at the door. And when those opportunities are there and things are on discount, right? Like when the market, let's just put it in a different context, turns in real estate and your property values drop 20 or 30%, do you immediately rush to go, I need to sell my properties now? Most people don't, right? They go, hey, you know what? I need to ride this thing out. I'm going to hold this thing for the long run. Unless you're in a foreclosure-based situation where you got to do something, most people are going to go, man, I got to ride this one out. You know, let's see how this plays out. And thank God you can't sell your house on the click of a button like you can on the stock market, right? Because it would create so much more volatility in such an interesting and profound asset class. And I think there's something to be said for that, right?
Someday we'll be able to click and do it. I think it's you know, if you listen to that guy's clip just now, a 10%, 11% decline in the last few days, he would say is a nothing burger. Although if it's only happened 50 times in the last 90 years, that's still kind of a big deal, right? It means we're at 51 out of 90. That's a bigger deal. But he's like, hey, it's going to happen no matter what. If we get down to a 20, 30% decline, which I would not be surprised for in this, then that's a significant change. I feel like it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think one thing to talk about, so many people talk about dollar costs averaging, right? Whatever the freaking word is, where as stocks, you buy the same amount every day, whether it's Bitcoin or whether it's stocks, you buy the same amount every day or same amount every week. So if it's going down or going up, you just keep getting more. In theory, that's cute. But you also need to have enough money to be able to buy the same amount of stock you bought today every week for the rest of the year for dollar cost averaging to actually work. Whereas I think it's a great strategy, I think for the average person, it's very difficult unless they're really, really good to go, hey, look, I make X dollars per month. Every month I take this much and I buy Tesla, or every month I take this much and I buy the NASDAQ. I do this much and buy gold or Bitcoin or whatever it is. I think it's great in theory, but it only works if you're buying the same amount of money every week, inside out. And I'm not good enough with my money to do that. So I would admire the people that are good enough at managing it. What else we got today? We heard Democrats think Vance is weird. That's a kind of a funny thing that I've seen lots of memes out there for. Maddie, you might like to attack that one. What else should we talk about?
No, I mean, that's an interesting one. I do want to continue to tap a little bit on whether or not we think this is kind of a warning bell for a potential recession.
Cool.
We can
dig in, yeah.
We can kind of shift to that. But yeah, I do. I'll just give you a quick comment. The people who want to chop kids' genitals off and take parental rights away and advocate for all of these weird things in the, under the cloak of quality and inclusion are the ones calling, the other individuals, the weird ones. I find very ironic. I'll digress off of that. However, going back to this discussion around, there was a woman named Claudia Soms, and she was the creator of a recession indicator called the SOM rule. And essentially it's when, and I need to kind of I wish I could explain it a little bit better. I could probably get ChatGPT to do it in a quick hot second. But that being said, the SOM rule has done a good job where essentially I think it's like 0.5. I'm not sure what the measurement is, gets over that metric and it stays there for a certain period of time. It essentially has predicted the last however many recessions that we've gone into. And as of this last week, we were at like 0.49. This week, it's at 0.51. And so kind of the recession alarm bells are starting to come off or go off. We've seen other big shops, Goldman Sachs, I think, just updated their recession prediction from 15 to like 25 or 28%, something like that. I don't think we're going to head necessarily into a recession, but it is possible. And here are some of the reasons why I could see it happening. When you look at the U.S. unemployment rate has risen for 4 consecutive months, which is the longest streak since the 2008 financial crisis. That's something to pay attention to. And over the last 75 years, every time unemployment rose for 4 consecutive months, the U.S. economy entered a recession. So if we're, again, looking at historical data, something to keep in mind there. Jobless rate has surged from 3.8% to 4.3% in July, which is the highest level since October of 2021. Meanwhile, U.S. hires rate declined to 3.4% in July, which is its lowest level since the pandemic in 2020. So we're definitely seeing a U.S. labor market contraction right now. Now, whether that's something that is going to be, catastrophic and lead to a recession, I think it's one variable that we can continue to look at. The one thing that I think is most important to look at right now that, has kind of been hard to make sense of, even though it's the elephant in the room that everybody knows about, is debt, right? Talking about our national debt, talking about credit card debt, talking about U.S. household debt, talking about car loan debt. So let me just break some of these numbers down for you. We can kind of have a quick little discussion around this. Total U.S. household debt increased by $109 billion in the second quarter of 2024 to a new record of $17.8 trillion. This was a report that was just released by the Fed yesterday. The breakdown of the large categories of that debt Mortgage debt is 12.52 trillion. Auto loans is 1.63 trillion. Student loans is 1.59 trillion. And then credit card debt is at an all-time high of 1.14 trillion. So total household debt in the US is now up 25% in 3 years and has hit a record high for 4 straight quarters. And so what I found really interesting, especially because, and I'll share this with you real fast as well, that $2.1 trillion of U.S. excess savings, which remember we said we're at an all-time high of people having cash in their savings account. It was at $2.1 trillion. That is now at a deficit of $170 billion. So we went from 2.1 trillion in excess savings being tracked in American citizens' accounts to now being at a deficit of $170 billion. And so when you think about, well, how does that happen? Well, when you think about that much money getting printed, no shit, we had so many issues with inflation and that money getting infused back into the economy after goods and services. But Americans are fighting inflation now that their cash reserves have run out with credit cards. And hence we've seen an inflation and a ballooning of credit card debt. And listen to this, credit card debt on average has an interest rate nearing 25% across the board. So when you think about people that are struggling right now, which is a lot of people, let's just be honest here. You know, there's a lot of people that are really struggling to make ends meet, to get groceries that make, sense. Their electricity is up, their utilities are up, their job wage growth maybe hasn't grown to the level that they need to see in order to keep ahead of this, snowball. And then you got credit cards that are charging you 25% interest and you're not paying those off every month. That's a really hard hole to dig yourself out of. So if this continues to happen, then we're going to see some major issues within the average American household and being able to stay in front of their financial situation. Now, you throw in other potential dominoes that might topple on top of that. That could be the straw that breaks the back for some people. That could be the straw that breaks the back for the economy in a way that we see such a major contraction. Now we are in a recession. So those are some of the things that I'm paying attention to and tracking right now. Because while we can sit here and say, well, it's weird, the economy is strong. Well, yeah, no shit. Because we got a lot of people right now that are living off their credit cards. And that's getting to a point where it may go to, at least a point of no return for some people. And those are some of the things that I know a lot of people aren't necessarily giving a whole lot of attention to.
I think I've talked to you guys a bunch about credit card stuff that's been dropping. I want to hear Mike's take on recessionary stuff. I'm going to grab an article really quick that I think is related to all this, right? It's really interesting too. I know I say interesting a lot. So what I'm sharing on the screen here is all these different articles of what the Fed is going to do. So 2 days ago, the market was blaming the Fed. And then they said yesterday, stock traders believed that the Fed was going to do an emergency session. And so stocks started popping yesterday and started going up because they believed the Fed was going to step back in. Then there was reports that the Fed has no intention of stepping in. And I think that's what created the sell-off again at the end of the day today. Right? So the fact that so much of this stock stuff, they're saying it started because the Fed said they weren't going to drop rates. And so now people are upset. That was what we said last week. So last week on like Wednesday, Thursday, whenever we recorded, that was the response we gave, that the stock drop was as a result of the Fed and not having another meeting for another month, and people saying the Fed should have dropped. But then, so yesterday it said traders bet on Fed emergency rate cuts. Right? It said people started so the stock started going up yesterday as a result of that. And then I think the sell-off by end of day today is people saying like, Fed's not going to do anything before September. So then the stocks start going back down. So I think life feels very recessionary. You guys know that in my worlds, I've been feeling lots of pain of more limited credit card options and debt options for things. I've been really, really surprised at how much it's been impacting our business and how much we've had to bet and our limits getting lowered on stuff. But my bet too of the fact, do I think that we can make it to the end of the year without a rate cut? Man, I guess it's a toss up in the sense that when I see the stock market falling and I think it's going to go further, and I see all these people calling for the Fed to lower it, part of me goes, the Fed's going to have to lower rates. And this is new news and something that I wasn't going to predict. And with this new information, I think it's probably more likely they're going to if the recession starts hitting this hard. But yesterday, when the world is going, the Fed, this is your fault. You need to come in and rescue. And they're like, sorry, see you in September. That's actually who I think the guy is, where I think he's like, you know what? This should be our Fed rate for the next 5-10 years. Really interesting. Mike, what do you think about all that? Anything Maddie said, anything I said?
Well, I mean, there's so much there, but even the idea of, and Mark Moss was actually talking about this, if this whole concept of whether this is completely true or not, I just think it shows how intertwined everything is. But him saying that Japan raising their interest rate by 1/4 point, he actually said that the Fed dropping the interest rates could have an even worse effect on the stock market if all of this stuff is truly tied together. And there really is all of this currency trading and spreads going on. And again, I don't understand all of that, but what it makes me come back to just, how does this matter to me? And is there a likely recession coming? There's so much going on in the world out there right now, and things that we probably actually really don't know the complexity of and how intertwined it is, just like this whole conversation with, the Japanese and the US spread, and how maybe volatile and sensitive the markets are and all of that. And so just coming back to a recession and even wrapping it back to politics and the volatility that's going on in the world. Like, what scares the living hell out of me is the fact that I was watching the acceptance speech or whatever it was of the VP pick for Kamala. And all I could think about hearing her introduce him was like all the volatility that's happening in the world right now and everything that's going on in the Middle East and China and Russia and Ukraine and Iran and Israel, and the fact that she could potentially be the one that is going to be like trying to
the commander in chief negotiating all of this. I just can't see it.
It's crazy. So I'm just kind of like, bro, and Aaron, even bullets will not help me. Like, this is all out World War III potentially happening. And so not again to go, down the conspiracy road, but the likelihood of a recession just from, a macro perspective, I don't understand all the intricacies, and I'm not an economist by any way, shape, or form. But, when you're talking about the credit cards, Maddie, and just the current position of the average American and the average person in the world, and how much of the stock market is propped up by, certain companies and everything that just goes on outside of that, I'm not overly optimistic. And I want to share one last thing. I've mentioned this book before, but have you guys read The Fourth Turning? So The Fourth Turning is a tough read, but he came out with a new book more recent. So it was originally written in 1997. And then they came out with a new book last year that's called The Fourth Turning is Here. And I'll just touch on this really quick, but kind of back to this whole concept. So essentially there's cycles in the world, and this goes back, they track this all the way back to the Roman Empire. And there's basically 100-year cycles that go roughly in 25-year cycles. And the thing that the Fourth Turning talks about in the book, there's these, so these are the cycles, and they take around 20 to 25 years, but the first one is a high, the second one is an awakening, the third one is an unraveling, and the fourth one is a crisis. And a lot of this, without getting too complex or in the weeds on this, but it's a generational thing, because the reason why they say that these cycles happen is because there's certain generational things that happen in this generation of 20 to 25 years. They come up with a certain mindset, and they actually tracked this back in America when they wrote this book, and they projected in this book when they wrote it in 1997 that we were going to be in the fourth turning sometime nearing 2030. And the crazy thing about this is, so he actually, let me just find this really quick. Howe is grimly adamant, however, that sometime before the mid 2030s, America will pass through a great gate in history, commensurate with these past crises. During that time, the risk of catastrophe will be high. The nation could erupt into insurrection or civil conflict, crack up geographically, or succumb to authoritarian rule. A major foreign war is also highly likely, and any war, foreign or civil, is likely to be one of maximum risk and effort. In other words, a total war, precisely because so much will seem to rest on the outcome. So when they wrote this book, The Fourth Turning is Here, and even in The Fourth Turning, they like call this that the 2020s are going to be the most volatile year, like decade, that we've experienced in a long time in the United States. And then they wrote this follow-up book, The Fourth Turning is Here. And you can see this guy on interviews everywhere. His name is Neil Howe. Go listen to him. And so again, how does this kind of like, they've watched these cycles for thousands of years. And when they wrote the book in 97, like, they're like, hey, we're entering the fourth turning, and America is either going to go off the cliff or we're going to get it together. But even if you do get it together, sometimes they delay it by 10 or 15 years. But usually it comes back to that fourth turning. And the good news, if there's any good news in any of this, is that for the most part, you go through the fourth turning, it creates chaos, and then you get a reset like we did in the early 1900s that took us into, the last 100 years, and it took us into the Industrial Revolution and everything else.
All right, so anyone that didn't kill yourself just now, thanks for still listening. I think Mike, I am going to read that, although I am depressed and scared already. It does seem like that. We've got the doomsday clock out there. It seems like we need we need a poll for how likely are we ready for recession? How close are we to civil war? How close are we to World War III, or the does it even matter poll? But there's a lot of different things going on out there. I think we'll probably toss it over to Matt for the final topic that I think he's got a few things teed up. But what I want to say is, man, I have a rosier outlook than those guys that wrote that book. But I might be out of my mind. So just like I can't afford to go down the rabbit hole of some of those stuff, I am going to try to read that to inform myself a little bit. Like, what can you do if you know the recession is coming? So we can all predict that the sky is falling. But like, why does it matter? What can you do about it if we don't give you some sort of options so that you can look at whatever your business is and try to figure out what's the recession-proof version of it? Like, the recession-proof version of housing is affordable housing. Right? The recession-proof version of cars is a Honda Accord, right? Every industry has a recession, even like for real estate agents, right? Short sales, and there are businesses and brands and things that become that recession-proof thing. And I'm sure even Ash with furniture, there's different versions of furniture. There's people shop at Walmart or people shop at the custom spot. You can get a $50 couch and you can get a $50,000 couch. Right. And I would have to bet that over the next couple of years, the $50 couch is going to sell more than the $50,000. So if you're going to take any sort of positivity or action from this, right, I think the thing I want to remind us is I built my biggest business during one of the biggest crises ever. And when everybody else was dying, I was thriving, and it was crazy. It was almost like a joke. Now, I need to remind myself of that too over the last couple of years, and that reminder of like, no, I've felt like this before, and I found a way to thread the needle, and I pray that I do again this time. So all of our, bad news and recession stuff might happen. Just know there are some plans and things you can do for your business. Don't sit around and do nothing. Maddie, you've got a few articles and fun stuff teed up. Why don't you take us home and close out the podcast?
Yeah, I think to your point though, Aaron, Bet David always has a good narrative around having a healthy level of paranoia. And you almost have to have a healthy level of paranoia, or you are looking at life in such a capacity or through a rose-colored set of lenses that you don't look around the corner, which leaves you exposed, right? And so if you're somebody that's going, no, World War III isn't going to happen, it's the highest probability of it ever happening today in American history. If and we could go on all kinds of topics. I guess what I'm trying to say is right now is a time that you do need to have a healthy level of paranoia around the things that could impact you. And I just saw this video, Tim, it was the second one that I just shared with you with Chris Pratt, that I just thought was really, really important. And I love seeing, we got a lot of woke celebrities, but I also love when you see a celebrity that kind of, is just level-headed and diplomatic, and the way they deliver things are palatable and, well received by no matter who you are and what you believe in. And Tim, if you could pull that one up, that would be awesome to share his little soundbite.
Today, and I might have my head in TikTok and Instagram. I might be disillusioned. Maybe I wouldn't know. Maybe I need someone to tap me on the shoulder and tell me that my country needs me. Tap me on the shoulder, ignite my patriotism in a whole new way. And I say this gently to those who are immersed in their own worlds, who think their country doesn't need them. And I say this to them with some urgency. It is your torch to carry. Your country needs you. I feel called to be of service in this moment, to help other people better understand what's at stake, and to help comprehend what has and continues to make America the great shining beacon on the hill. Changing the hearts and minds of young people right now who have either forgotten or maybe never knew just how great our country truly is. That is the work that we all need to do. We need each other, man. We're on the same team. We're the United States of America. When we are one nation under God, we are indivisible. Let us never forget that, lest it be lost. Today, and
so I just thought that was just such a, one, beautifully said, and two, more relevant and applicable today now than ever. There's a lot of people that just don't know. They're just ignorant. And then there's a lot of people that have forgotten. And then there's, a lot of people that are in between that in some capacity. But at the end of the day, I think he just does a great job of reminding us that, man, we're all on Team Human. We're all in this crazy, wild journey and struggle, and timeline together right now, which in itself is a miracle. And so if there was ever a time to feel called to maybe educate yourself a little bit more, maybe be a little bit more open-minded and getting involved in some conversations, maybe, speaking up on something that is really important to you and that you're passionate about and that actually matters to you, and, being a leader, and kind of taking charge and stepping out into an area that might feel uncomfortable or, might feel a little bit exposed to you. I think those are the things that, and it doesn't matter your viewpoint. I'm cool with if you're on the left, if you're on the far left, if you're on the far right, if you're on the right, this is the time that I think more and more of us need to just step up and start having conversations, because my belief is there's so many less people on the far right and on the far left than it's made out to be. And the more people that are maybe a little bit on the left and maybe a little bit on the right, who are very open-minded, who are very centrist, who actually care about, open debate and dialogue and discussion, are going to be the ones that actually create the conversation that remind us that, oh shit, man, we're all on the same team here. Why are we choosing sides on this kind of stuff? And to the last point, Tim, as you tee this last quote up, I think now more than ever, if you're somebody that's listening to this podcast, if you're somebody that wants better for your life, if you want to build a bigger business, a better body, a bigger bank account, no matter what it is that you're striving towards, if you're somebody that really wants more and you're willing to work for it, now is the greatest time in history ever to go out and get it. And we can close it out with this video, Tim, if you want to pull that up. It is a beautiful soundbite that just reminded me, one, it got me fired up, and two, it's a reminder to everybody in your business, your friends, your family, your kids. Now is the best time to succeed if you adopt this mindset.
I love TikTok.
And I'm telling you from the bottom of my soul, it is so easy to beat people today. They are so soft. They have no work ethic. No one can stick with anything. Everyone's distracted. They're on social media. They're counting their fucking notifications because they can't stick with shit. They can't say no.
Because of that, there's never been more opportunity than there is right now. If you're a fucking savage and you get out there and you grind hard and you want it bad enough, you can run all these guys over, man.
It's so easy to be great nowadays, my friend, because most people are weak. Most people don't want to go to that extra mile. Most people don't want to find that extra because it sucks. It's miserable. It's lonely. And that's where I gain the advantage.
I got to just, my post yesterday on Instagram, and it blew up. It was that concept of like success isn't complicated. It's just hard. Like the solution for me is simple. It's like get up earlier, work harder, do the simple, things that most people aren't willing to do, whether that's wake up early and then go work out and then go do the thing, and then stay later, right? It's not complicated. And like, I love that whole idea today of that used to be the American dream. The American dream used to be work hard and life will come for you. And then I do think we've had this period of time where that hasn't actually been true, right? There were plenty of people that worked hard, that the way the system was set up, it was very difficult for them to succeed. But I do think today it is back at that whole concept that no, if you're willing to work hard, it's going to be way easy to beat all the people around you. And it is it's not easy, but a very simple equation. I friggin' love that.
Yeah. Just a good message to close out today's show. Right. And if you're somebody that, is somewhere that maybe you feel like you should be further ahead or you're not where you want to be at. I mean, at some point you got to be real with yourself about the gap between the life that you want to live and the life that your daily habits and your mindset and your relationships and your environment and the things that you're, ultimately doing have led you to be in. And so if you want to make a shift, that's the beautiful thing is there's not that many people. They want it, but they're not willing to do what it takes to get it. And so if you are one of those people that's willing to do what it takes to get it now more than ever is going to be one of the most opportunistic. It's going to be wild. It's going to be hard, right? It's going to be very challenging, but it's there for the taking. And so I just wanted to wrap up on that message today, being that I just feel more as confused and crazy as, life may feel. I feel more energized and excited than I've ever felt before about what opportunities lie ahead of us, because I know it's going to be hard. And I'm geared up. And one of the things I always tell myself is, man, you're built for this shit. If anybody was built for this shit, it's you. And if, you're listening to our show right now, if anybody was built for this shit, it's you, because you're already doing a lot of the things. You're already getting in the right conversations. And there's just some small tweaks and degrees that need to be shifted a little bit. But if you got that work ethic and you're willing to do the hard shit when most people in our society are not, you're going to get rewarded for it. And I'm excited for those people.
Stay excited. Mikey, what's the most positive thing you could say about our future?
Well, I don't know about the future in general, but I was thinking about just
Mike's like, we're fucked, man. Just read the book, forthcoming. It's here.
No, and to your guys' point, like, again, it's like, what can we do about it, right? Like, we can't stop the fourth turning. We can't stop a world. Like, we can't stop. I love what you guys are saying here. And the thing that I wanted to say on everything that you guys just shared, if you think back to every group you've ever spoken to, whether it's Ascend or Emerge or Aaron, your mastermind, or Maddie, your mastermind, like, there's so many stories that come up from the past of like challenges and, hardest times of your life. And, whether it was prison or me going almost bankrupt or people actually going bankrupt, like, those are the stories that, like, people get inspired by. Why? Because you were in a really tough spot. You were in a really hard time and you made it through. And here's the things that I did to get it through. But what we fail to realize sometimes is like, that's not the last story that's going to be told. And like right now, we might be in a really challenging time, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's going to be just another story that somebody's going to be inspired by, as long as we do what Aaron's saying. And as long as we do what Maddie's saying, or like what was in these Instagram, TikTok videos of like being a badass and getting through it. So the reason why Maddie is able to share a story from 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or Aaron, your story, is because you were a badass then. The thing that we forget about sometimes is that, like, that seems like a small problem. That 5 year ago problem, 10 year ago problem seems like a small problem compared to what I'm going through today. But in 5 years or 10 years from now, whatever I'm going through today is going to be a small problem for whatever's happening in the future. Why? Because we're badass and we just keep growing and moving and entering new territory. And the guy that sits on his couch, that's the opposite of what you guys were talking about a few minutes ago, is the guy that never accomplishes anything. So we'll find ourselves here again. But the story that I'm building today and what I'm going through today is going to be my victory story 2 years from now and 5 years from now. Whether it's the fourth turning, whether it's a freaking world war, it comes back to the same thing. What can I focus on? What can I change in my business? What can I change in my life? How can I go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and quit spending money on stupid shit and just paying attention to what's in front of me?
Heck of a way to finish it off, man. The, listeners, hopefully you enjoyed getting to hear from us today. We were obviously missing the king of the Sultan of Sofas. Ashish Nathu was not here. I'm so glad that I got to talk to my friends, Mike and Maddie today, and that you guys just got to listen. We're dealing through these things real time, and that inspiration that Mikey closed with at the end, the horrible, horrible moments he's going through right now for future Mike. This is just another Tuesday. So whatever you're going through right now, reach out, because somebody else knows this is just another Tuesday. Kings, thanks for listening. Mikey and Maddie, thanks for being here.
Thanks, boys.
Bye, guys.